Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new edition of Political Agenda. Tonight, we will continue discussing the Syrian crisis. Actually, Arab ministers met in Cairo to revive diplomatic efforts after the Arab initiative that called for President Bashar Assad to step aside was told by the double veto in New York by Russia and China. As part of the Arab efforts, Tunisia said it would host the first meeting on February 24th for a Friends of Syria contact group made up of Arab and other states and backed by Western powers. How long will we stay as onlookers to what is happening to the brotherly Syrian people, and how much longer will we grant the Syrian regime one period after another so it can commit more massacres against its people? Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal asked the ministers at the start of the League's session. At our meeting today, I call for decisive measures after the failure of the half solutions, he said. The Arab League should open all the channels for communication with the Syrian opposition and give all forms of support to it. The viewers, in order to discuss the topic furthermore, I have along with me in the studio Professor Ibrahim النحاس, Professor of Political Science at KSU, from Cairo, Bassam Ishaq, member of General Secretariat of the National Syrian Council, last but not the least, Professor Alan Ben Meyer, International Negotiator, Senior Fellow at the Center of Global Affairs from New York, the United States. Thank you all for joining me. Dear viewers, before we start discussing the issue, let's take a look at this report and we'll come back for further discussion of the topic.
The Syrian case has been on the verge of escalation for months. However, the latest couple of days have witnessed the most detrimental to solving the Syrian crisis. With time passing, more countries are becoming involved, while the Syrian grounds seem to become the battlefield for many powers, according to analysts. The ongoing violence has not halted in Homs, a hotbed of the uprising, for a period of 10 days.
The situation in Homs, unfortunately, is fulminating. This constant killing and escalation is pushing people to anger and retaliation.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov regretted the suspension of the Arab League's monitors' mission on the ground, adding that sending a peacekeeping missions could only be proceeded under Syrian concession and approval. Many fear that the peacekeeping mission could be a justification later on to send more forces and merge into international intervention, a solid Russian rejection with no intention to modulate under any international stresses. According to Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Al-Jafari has reiterated that Syria has the right to protect Syrian civilians against terrorism and violence committed by the armed groups. As UN Speaker Navi Pillay states that there should be an immediate international action to put an end to the violence ongoing in Syria.
I will continue to make these calls for action. I don't think these very serious human rights violations should be forgotten and swept under the carpet. There has to be accountability. My call right now is for the violence to stop. These are the nature of the calls I made with regard to Sri Lanka. Lives would have been changed if the international community acted.
Meanwhile, one of the major reforms, the constitution reform, is on its way to realization as the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has accepted the final and complete copy draft of the new constitution, which will be held in March for a national referendum. Nonetheless, the National Coordination Council, as a home opposition, clearly states that violence should stop in order to find a political solution to the conflict, which will assure a peaceful transition for the crisis.
In the National Coordination Council, we are mainly concerned to put an end to violence and the continuing escalation of killing, which is reaching hundreds daily. This is an essential situation. This is why, finally, the Arab League's decision to sending Arab and international observers, or even peacekeepers, Arabic and international, from the United Nations, in my opinion, is necessary.
However, as time passes, the Syrian case seems to be convoluted, with many civilian lives lost and military members. Most Syrians see with the latest developments that the fate of their country has already gone international. This is Diana Namif for Political Agenda, Damascus.
Thank you, Diana Nama from Damascus. And the view was the double veto jeopardized the efforts of the Arab League and the GCC countries and the Western countries. So the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, have spoken on this behalf last Friday in Al Janadriya's inauguration on last Wednesday, actually. The custodian of the two holy mosques has described, Dr. Ibrahim, let me start with you, what happened in the United Nations as unfavorable move, and that the confidence in the United Nations has been shaken. How do you read what has been said by the custodian of the two holy mosques?
Yes, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for inviting me to be in this good program, actually.
Thank you.
The custodian of the two holy mosques, actually, he first, by the time he received the guest of Al Janadriya, actually, and he want to show, actually, that the Islamic principles and values is against anything that against humanity, actually. The Syrian regime, the way that he is dealing with the situation, the crackdown over his people, actually, its people, and using military, using any kind of weapons, that makes the custodian of the two holy mosques with the world, actually, supported with the GCC, as you said, with the Arab League, to think about it. The custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah, he said the United Nations, actually, the way that the Russian and the China, he didn't mention that, actually, but
well, yeah, the double veto, he spoke about the double veto.
Yes, and he meant it, and actually he said isn't right that the United Nations didn't support or doesn't support the humanitarian or the human rights, actually, around the world. And the thing that we see, actually, every day on TV, the Syrian regime way dealing with the people isn't right, and he sent a message to the world, actually. We, as Islamic country, we stand against anything with supporting this kind of way of dealing with the people, especially against Russia and China, the way that they're dealing about it.
Okay, let me hear it from Bassam Ishaq from Cairo. Bassam, let me start with the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, was among the first leaders to speak, if you remember, last Ramadan. The king's words have a humane, moral, and political meaning to what is happening in Syria. As a Syrian, how did you receive the words of the custodian of the two holy mosques at the first time in Ramadan, and how did you receive it this week?
First, I would like to greet your viewers.
Thank you.
And thank you for inviting me to be on your program.
You're welcome, sir. Please.
The Syrian people were grateful for the comments made by King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. We are, appreciate and value his position. He is represents a leader in the Arab world and a leader in the Islamic world. So his position is valued and is very important, and plays a role in balancing the position of Russia and the position of China in the Security Council. So as a Syrian, myself and my friends in the opposition and the Syrian people who are fighting for their freedom and dignity, we all value and appreciate the comments made by King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz.
Let's go to New York with Professor Alan Ben Meyer. Professor Alan, the custodian of the 12 mosques, also spoke about the relations, and especially in the United Nations and the Security Council. King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz has said the world confidence in the United Nations has been shaken. How do you read this sincere call to reform the United Nations in your point of view, Professor?
Well, there's no question that the confidence in the United Nations has been shaken. The concern we have today is that Russia in particular, who has been supportive of Syria and Iran for so long, and which has very strong economic, political, and military interest in Syria, has basically decided to ignore what the Syrian regime is doing, killing literally dozens, if not hundreds of people on every single day. And I think this is totally and completely unacceptable. But the question today for us is not what the United Nations can or cannot do, because the truth of the matter is, even if the Arab Initiative were to pass, what would peacekeeping force in fact achieve in Syria? You remember that the Arab observers who went there and stayed for nearly a month, during their stay, more than 500 Syrians were killed by the Syrian military and internal police.
Yes.
What we need today is much more drastic action. And I want to mention just 4 or 5 different steps very briefly. One, I think we need to recognize immediately the Syrian National Council as the legal representative of Syria. Number 2, I think with the support of Turkey, we need to establish immediately a safe zone so that Syrians who escape the slaughter and those who are organizing to fight back will have a place to go where they can receive aid, they can receive food, they can receive weapons, and they can receive whatever direction and training they need. 3, I think an effort should be made to reach out for the Syrian military who might reconsider their position and decide to undertake a coup against the regime. After all, 90% of the Syrian military is made out of Sunnis. And I don't believe that the Syrian military would like to see the entire institution collapse if they don't do something about it. So I think through back channels, we need to reach out for the Syrian military command and to see if they are prepared to take action against Bashar al-Assad through a military coup and take it from there. And finally, I want to mention to you, it is not a question whether President Assad steps down or not. The problem we have is that it's a whole system of government. You have the elite of the Ba'ath Party. You have the internal security. You have the Mukhabarat, the internal intelligence.
Yes.
You have his brother Maher, the head of the Guard, National Guard. They all have vested interest in the current system, and they will not allow Bashar al-Assad to take any action that is going to undermine their hold on power now or in the future.
Okay. Professor Ibrahim, if we to describe the vision of King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz regarding the role which the United Nations should undertake, taking into consideration its inability to stand against the Russian-Chinese veto or the US veto sometimes, the Security Council stands still when any country of the permanent 5 members uses the veto. Should we stay on that regard? Well, it was formed after the 1945 war, after the end of the Second World War. Should we look for any solutions in the Security Council, or should it stay in the same? How did you read the words of the leader, of our leader, towards the Security Council?
This is very important and big question actually, because as you said, the UN show failure actually in resolving many issues. One of these big issues actually the Syrian situation right now, and the world before actually asked, many countries before they asked for reforming the United Nations issues actually, and Security Council, should we add some countries to it or take the the right of vetoes of these 5 members? Right now, if you want to work outside the United Nations, it's very tough to bring countries to support this issue, because all of them need the right to or the umbrella to work under of it actually. One issue it's to talk with the Russian and the Chinese about the future and about the actually interest of their interest in the Arab world and Islamic world and in the region actually, and talk to them directly. Other way, might they work with the NATO, for example, as a power, and to take the issue. But you have to.
So looking for solutions outside the Security Council.
Yeah, this may be another this
Another solution, another step.
another step outside the United Nations, actually. But you have to pay for that, actually, for the Arab world, and who will pay for it, and how to pay for it, and can they
pay the bill?
and can they take the risk, actually, because they work outside the United Nations. It's a big issue. For that, right now, the Arab League, when they talk about the peace, force, Arab peace force, actually, they just want, they know that the Syrian regime will not accept it. They want to show the Russian and the Chinese, the Syrian regime don't want to work with the world. And we can talk about some issues that our friend from New York actually talk about it, about the future.
Okay, let me hear it from Bassam Ishaq from Cairo. Bassam, because of the Russian-Chinese veto, the United Nations Security Council failed to pass a resolution in the Syrian regime. Is this an indication that the Security Council has become incapable to defend international peace and security?
Absolutely. This is a clear case where the mandate of the General Security Council has not been able to be fulfilled in an obvious case where a regime is killing its own people. It's resisting their demands for freedom and dignity. This is a case that makes us all think for a need to reform the general security of the United Nations. There is a problem. We have an urgent matter here to address where people are being massacred at the hands of the so-called government, and the Security Council is not able to take an action, is not able to protect the people. It is failing morally in accomplishing its own mandate.
Dr. Ben Mayer, the veto is a power used by any permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. In some cases, the veto is used for certain special interests, such as the Russian-Chinese veto on the Syrian case. How can this system be reformed in your point of view, sir?
The truth of the matter is it's an extraordinarily difficult to reform the system. This has been created when the United Nations Security Council was created. The 5 permanent members will stay, and as long as they have a veto power, any change into the National Security Council structure, or the General Assembly for that matter, will be vetoed if it doesn't serve their interest. But the truth of the matter, this is not the time to talk about reform in the United Nations Security Council. This is the time to do something to stop the killing machine in Syria. Every single day, hundreds are dying, and we have to do something about it now and not wait for the reforms in the Security Council. That is why the United States, with the support of the Arab League, the EU, and Turkey, should be able to begin taking immediate action on the ground. We cannot allow the regime to continue to slaughter its people with impunity. And no change in the Security Council is going to make any difference at this point. There's only one other point I want to mention.
Please.
The General Assembly of the United Nations can pass a resolution almost immediately, and I think they will pass it, to condemn what's happening in Syria. This will not have legal implication, but it will have moral implication, so that the whole world will say to Syria, this is not acceptable what you're doing. But what we need right now is direct involvement, direct interference in Syria in order to stop the killing. And I think what I mentioned to you before is doable, and it should start immediately.
Okay. Professor Ibrahim, do you have anything to add? And I want to go into now more details. At our meeting today, I call for decisive measures. This is Saud al-Faisal speaking. After the failure of the half solutions, he said. In your point of view, what did he mean by decisive measures to be taken by the world against the Syrian regime rather than the half solutions?
Yeah, I believe this is a message for especially for the Russian and the China, that if you stop the United Nations from doing something to stop this, you have to involve and bring your resolution or bring anything that to stop this issue, and don't leave it like just you stop it. That's what I believe. He put the ball right now on their, on their side to see, but nothing happened actually from that side because the Arab League, the United Nations tried to do something, but then it stopped by the Russian and the Chinese. So what we can do?
All the efforts were stopped.
Yes.
Bassam in Cairo, Mr. Ishaq, allow me to ask you another question regarding that. The Arab League should open all channels of communication with the Syrian opposition and give all forms of support to it. That was said by Saud al-Faisal, the foreign minister. How did you read the message by Saud al-Faisal?
What I see in the message of Prince Saud al-Faisal is a determination to address the demands of the Syrian people, who have demonstrated now for almost 11 and a half months and asked for freedom and for dignity. And the Syrian regime has tried to maneuver around these demands, have tried to claim that there is only terrorists who are working in Syria to destabilize the country, has avoided to legitimize the demands of its own people. The message of Saud al-Faisal is, we hear the Syrian people, their demands are legitimate, and we are going to try every way to make their demands come true. So this is a big moral boost for the Syrian people. It's a recognition by the foreign minister of a leader in the Arab and Islamic world. So we are very appreciative as in the Syrian National Council and as a opposition in general of these comments. And it gave us a big moral boost, and it let us know that this effort by the Syrian people, this revolution, will eventually, with the help of our friends in the Arab world, such as Saudi Arabia, a leader in the Arab and Islamic world, that eventually we will bring down the dictatorship in Syria, and that we will be able to regain our freedom and build a new Syria that is democratic, a new Syria that is based on citizenship, a new Syria that can be partnered with the rest of the world and with its neighbors.
Dr. Alan Ben Meyer, do you think what has been said by Mr. Ishaq in Cairo can be achieved?
Yes, I think it's very important that the Syrian National Council get much better organized and be much more representative of all the Syrian population, because this is a very important issue. When you are talking about reforms and democracy in the future in Syria, and now that we are speaking about the possibility of recognizing the Syrian National Council, the Syrian National Council ought to be representative of all Syrian people. Number two, I think the National Council should begin to form what I call a shadow government. A shadow government that will have a foreign minister, a defense minister, interior minister.
As what happened in Libya when they formed another government is used.
Well, no, even much more. Well, there in Libya, it's not quite organized because there's a chaotic situation. I think in the Syrian Council, it's much better compared to what's happening in Libya.
Okay.
But they will be able to articulate a policy, which means what are they going to do once Bashar Assad leave power? They have to articulate initiative, policies, strategy, so that the whole world will hear and understand what the Syrian National Council stands for. This is going to be very important. In so doing, they will be able to get more support, both moral support, political support, financial support, as well as military support if it's needed.
Professor Ibrahim, now in the middle of this chaos, Dr. Ben Meyer and Mr. Ishaq have spoken about good points. Now let's start with the peacekeeping force that is was asked to have a peacekeeping force rather than monitoring observers or monitoring mission. So do you think the peacekeeping force could have any role in Syria right now?
Yeah, I don't think so. It's very important, you know, for the Arab League to put that actually, because if you have peace force actually, you have to have two sides they fight against each other, like you know, civil war, for example, big civil war. But in the case of Syria, you have a regime who using, you know, all kind of heavy weapons actually against innocents. So it doesn't work for me in that. It doesn't mean anything for me as peace forces to talk about it from Arab or from any kind, you know, or any other country actually. What we need that force to stop the, you know, military, the Syrian military from using its power. That's what we need, like the NATO, for example. We don't need any kind of, you know, peace. Observers didn't do anything actually. No, they did the against, you know, the right that they should do. They actually show the Syrian regime is nice and doing very well. That I mean, I'm talking about the report of you know, General Dabi. What we need is something different. And you know, for me. The national, you know, opposition, you know,
Council.
The National Council.
Syrian National Council.
Yes, I agree with Dr. You know, our friend from New York. Yeah, he's right. They should organize themselves much more, but they should also bring all, you know, opposition under their umbrella, and they must do what they can do actually to do that, and they must, you know, agree about a very important point that all oppositions. When they go to the media, they should, you know, talk in one way, and you know, they should, you know, they shouldn't talk about their differences, and you know, all of them, you know, some of their opposition, they say, yeah, we want, you know, to be in the future, and all of them want to be in authority actually. They must, you know, do very well in the media actually, because that sends the message to the Syrian people and to the world actually.
Well, dear viewers, let's take it. What the Syrians want from the Arab League, what do also the Syrian will give solutions to us. We'll discuss that after a short pause. Welcome back to Political Agenda. We're continuing discussing the Syrian crisis and also the Syrian atrocities and the Syrian people problems faced by their own governments. Let me go to Cairo with Mr. Ishaq. Mr. Ishaq, what do the Syrian public want from the Arab League, from their friendly countries, from the Western world, from the Security Council? What is it that you are demanding?
We are demanding both moral and logistic support in order that we accomplish our goal and achieve our freedom of building a new Syria that is democratic and free. So we need support along the way as needs arise. We need logistic and moral support, as I said. We need to be able to defend our civilian population from the military power of the regime. We need to guarantee the freedom to demonstrate We need to be able to release all political prisoners. We want to be able that media, the foreign media, be able to have access to Syria and tell the truth. Because what we have is a big deception that the regime is displaying on its media and through its media people. It's a campaign of lies. Well, we are thankful that in this time we have ability to take videos, to transfer these videos through internet, so part of the truth become known. Now, what we see about the oppressiveness of the regime against the Syrian people is actually about, at best, 20% of what actually is happening on the ground. So we want help, we want pressure on the Syrian regime so that the truth comes out, so that the criminality of this regime becomes obvious. We need pressure on Russia, we need pressure on China, that they will know that this position that is supposedly for their interest is really against their interest. It is against their interest to make enemies of the Syrian people, and it's again should be made known to them that it's against their interest in the world, not just in Syria, in the world, to take a position with the killer against the people who are being killed.
Alan Ben Meyer said Arab foreign ministers plan to organize a Friends of Syria conference in Tunisia on 24th of this month, February. What can such conference do for the Syrian people? And if we are ought to help the Syrian people, the international community, what does it need to do to help the people of Syria?
You know, unfortunately, and it is quite tragic, that there is so much talk, conferences and more meetings. The Arab states know only too well what's going on in Syria today. The Arab League can itself begin to take much more decisive actions along what His Majesty the King Abdullah has said. Much more decisive, or the foreign minister for that matter.
Saud al-Faisal, yes.
For example, why not stop civilian flight to Damascus from every single Arab country immediately? Why not stop trade with Syria almost immediately? So there are certain steps that need to be taken today. Yes, the meeting on the 24th of February could produce additional measures to put pressure, both moral, political, on the Syrian regime. But every day that passes, hundreds are getting killed and destruction and causing havoc all over. And this has to stop. So I'm concerned that there's too much talk and very little action, and the people of Syria are paying with their lives.
Professor Ibrahim, both of my guests from Cairo and New York have spoken very well of Mr. Ishaq asked what is the demands of the legitimate demands of the people of Syria. Also, Professor Ben Meyer spoke that the meetings do not, it's just accumulating of paperwork, do not help if we do not have actions or decisive actions, as he said, stop trade, stop flights, stop this, stop that, in order to take an action. As a professor of political science, in those cases, what should the Arab League, the Saudi Arabia wants to help the Syrian people, the GCC wants to help, the friendly country wants to help, but how can we help?
These points are good, but when we go to practice it on the ground and put it really in the governments, actually, we see the Arab League divided, actually. You know, we have Iraq supporting the Syrian regime, for example. Lebanon government actually completely. Algeria has, you know, some point they stopped against it. So you can't, if you don't have collective, you know, from all, you can't impose it on all, you know. For example, if Jordan really stop everything, What about Iraqi border? You know, it's long border and that go to Iran actually. We know the situation of al-Maliki government. So this will fail very quick. The second thing.
So should we fix the Arab League, like the decisions of the Arab League to take by majority instead of collectively? I see Dr. Alan Ben Meyer shaking his head.
Yeah.
Dr. Alan, do you want to add anything?
I want to say,
Please.
it does not have to be all or nothing. You know, there are countries like Egypt, like Saudi Arabia, all the Gulf states, Morocco, Jordan, they can take action today. Turkey, with the support of these countries, can take significant action by carving a big chunk of Syrian territory, establish a safe haven for Syrians to come in, for the defectors from the army. So things can happen today. We cannot wait for another resolution and another resolution. When these resolutions come by, it's fine. But until then, we need to take action now and not wait for another meeting to take place. When these meetings take place and a new resolution are passed, that's fine. You can add more pressure and more pressure on Syria. But we must not wait one single minute.
Exactly. He reminds me of the words of Prince Saud al-Faisal where he said, how much longer will we grant the Syrian regime one period after another so it can commit more massacres against its people? So
exactly.
Dr. Ibrahim.
No, I'm thinking about the future actually. I'm thinking just right now. Yeah.
What is the
way that we want to stop this, all of us agree about it. But
how can we stop?
Yes, but
is the how what
I mean, I'm thinking about the future actually. If we work in this and impose everything as to stop the Syrian situation, we don't want actually to lose Algeria as a country in the future. We don't want to lose Lebanon actually in the future. We don't want to lose the Iraqi people in the future. That's the bigger question I'm thinking about it, not right now. And the second thing about if we stop trade with the Syrian regime, I'm sure the Syrian people will be affected more than the Syrian regime, because the Syrian regime has everything and it can be supported by the Iranian government, Russian government, for example, and it can be live for a long time. That's why we talk about different countries, different kind of regime, different way of thinking. But the GCC actually they agree about everything and they can impose it tomorrow. But you have also Egypt as example. The secretary of the Arab League actually he's against and he's with to some extent with the Syrian regime.
Okay, Mr. Ishaq, the GCC countries have decided to recognize the Syrian National Council, the SNC, as a legitimate representative of the Syrian people. How do you read the development step?
I think this is a development in the right direction. Eventually, the SNC will have to be recognized as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. The SNC is the largest umbrella of political groups from the opposition. The other opposition is inside. It cannot really express the real demands of the Syrian people because of the pressure that it's under. So I think it will also help us when we are recognized as legitimate representative to receive logistic support, and it will be a big morale boost for the revolutionists inside of Syria as well. It will help us to hold formal meetings with the counterparts in the world. It will also help us make clear to the Syrian current regime that its days are over, that it is done, that it's not just the Syrian people have said its days are done, but also the Arab world, the Islamic world, the whole world. It will say to this regime, your days are done. The days of killing innocent Syrian civilians are done. We will do everything to bring you down. We will do everything to stop you.
Professor Ben Meyer, also, do you want to add anything?
No, you know, I think it's the recognition of the Gulf state of the Syrian National Council. It's important. It's very important, and I agree with my friend from in Cairo. But such recognition should also be extended by the West, specifically the United States, the EU, the Turkey, for that matter. This is going to be very important. Once you recognize the Syrian National Council, and once the Security National Council organizes itself, the way I have spoken earlier, then the West can also take additional measures. For example, along with Turkey, the United States, the EU and Turkey could impose a no-flying zone. This is going to be very, very important. Who is going to stop it? I don't think Russia or China will be able to challenge steps like this. So what we need to think out of the box and begin to take steps that neither China or Russia can do anything about it, because they are outside the realm of the United Nations Security Council.
What has been said by Professor Ben Meyer is to work one side, or to take actions by the friends of Syria, let's say the Arab countries, along with Turkey, the EU, the United States, should act alone outside the Security Council and make a no-fly zone or safe havens for the people of Syria. As a political observer, sir, do you think this could be, or this action could be taken, and is it a successful move?
We hope
if it happens.
No, we hope, but it doesn't work. It will not work.
Why doesn't it?
Yeah, we know that Turkey actually, it has a long border with
Syria.
With Syria actually, yeah, but it has border with Iran and some border with Russia and Russian, Soviet Union in the past, and right now with it has big interest, actually economy interest with Russia, and they want good interest in the future, and they have good relationship with Iran in energy in specific. So they can't think about anything right now against their interest right now. They think about their interest, and they talk about it actually, and they don't want to lose it, and they talk about it many times. And for that, when Erdogan government, they announce actually foreign policy without a problem with any country. They can't change it between day and night, and they can't in this time work outside the United Nations, even if they is a member of the NATO, but they will not to go that long with outside the United Nations, because their relation actually with Russia and Iran, and they want to actually to show they are not under the umbrella of the United States in this situation in political agenda. Maybe in military, if they face any problem, international problem, they under the umbrella of the NATO and the United States. But in political side, they work against anything, against any country to work against their interest. And we know the French situation in the EU, and the problem about the Armenian
massacres in Turkey by 1913 or something.
Yes, they want to show they are work for their interest, not for the other interest.
Okay. Mr. Ishaq in Cairo, also, do you think, in your point of view, that political pressure on Syrian regime by Arab countries would bring an end to the bloodshed in Syria?
I think every pressure will help, especially if it comes from the Arab world. Syria and the Syrian regime has tried to proud itself as being pro-Arabism, so it really robs it of this umbrella if pressure comes from the Arab world. And I think the whole neighborhood, including Turkey, and including world players, cannot afford instability in Syria for a long time. They will have to come to the aid of the Syrian people and to try to resolve this crisis in a way that brings back stability and peace to Syria. It's not to anybody's interest that Syria become unstable. So I think there is also this interest, including Russia. Russia cannot benefit from Syria that is unstable. It's very important, the geographical location of Syria for Russia. Its window to the Mediterranean. Therefore, Russia, if eventually realize that this regime is not sustainable, it cannot continue, it will have to think about its long-term interest with the Syrian people.
Professor Ben Meyer. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, let me just say, only yesterday,
Yes.
the foreign minister of Turkey, Ahmed Davidolo,
Yeah.
said very openly that Turkey will be prepared, and I repeat, that Turkey will be prepared to take whatever steps necessary, including military, in order to bring an end to the carnage in Syria. And he said deliberately that he is not going to reveal all the Turkey's plan because it is entailing some further consultation. But I want to mention something very important that related to Turkey. Today, the situation in Syria is what happened in Syria post-Saddam, post-Bashar Assad is critically important for Turkey, and it is also as critically important for Iran. For this reason, Turkey and Iran, for all intent and purposes, are on a collision course because Iran wants to keep Bashar Assad in power. Turkey does not want to keep him any longer in power. He is finished for all intent and purposes. And Russian interest is much bigger because Russia's interest is not limited to Syria. It is also with Iran.
To the whole region.
And as long as Iran, as long as Iran continue to support Syria, the Russian will not be able to extract themselves from Syria. This is what the Russian decided to veto the resolution, which means Iran has a crescent going from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean that include Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And this is a sphere of influence. They do not want it to be interrupted under any circumstances. And it is Russia who is supporting that crescent and is not going to, or will continue to oppose any changes that may impact on Iran and Syria in particular. That is why we need to think outside the United Nations. We need to strengthen the Syrian National Council. We need to provide them with food, with weapons if necessary, with a safe zone, with no flying zone, whatever it takes. And in so doing, we can also extract eventually Syria out of Iran's belly. And that is going to be the greatest achievement of the Arab world, Saudi Arabia in particular, the United States, and other powers who are very keen and concerned about what Iran is trying to do in the Middle East and using Syria and Hezbollah and Iraq to achieve its regional hegemony.
What has been said by Professor Ben Meyer has been said by King Abdullah II of Jordan a few years ago when he spoke about the Shiite crescent, include Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon with Hezbollah, and some parts of Jordan. Russia has interests in Syria, especially the Tartus is it called the Tartus naval base. It is the only naval base for Russia outside its borders nowadays, and its only entrance to the region. So do you think, Professor, that Russia will fight all the way to keeping its relations with Syria, and regardless what has been said by my guests from New York and Cairo, all the help that is asked, do you think Russia will go all the way because they wanted to keep their own feet on the grounds of an important region in the world, the Middle East?
Yeah, I will come to this. Just I will
Please,
comment just on one point.
Go ahead.
If Turkey works with the NATO and EU with the United States and imposing a no-fly
zone and a safe haven.
The big question here for the democratic system, who will pay for it? We know that the parliaments in all these countries must agree about money, where
The
to
bills,
spend
the money where to be
and we
paid.
know that the United States right now has election in this year, France the same thing, and maybe some other countries will have in the
So
future.
you think financing the mission will be the problem?
The basic thing.
The basic.
The basic, and we know that if the United Nations will, under the umbrella of UN, that might collective, governments will pay for it. But in this case, Turkey must pay for it with the United States and the NATO, and they will not do it. And for that, they will not impose anything in this way. That
Are the Arab world willing to pay some parts of the bill?
outside the United Nations, I don't think so.
It's very hard.
Yeah, it's no, they because there is big risk for them. They must. It's against Arabic country. It's outside the UN. How will justify it in the future actually, and how will justify it to Iran and Russia and China because you have big interest with them. That the way of a political system think in this way, I believe. I'm not within the system, but that my way of thinking. About your question, actually, I don't think Russia is doing this just for the Syria. We know that Syria has a strategic geographical way or something, but I believe Russia is using the Syrian situation for for their talk with the United States about some issue in maybe Central of Asia, or about the long missiles in that under the NATO umbrella, or with the Iranian situation. They using the Syrian situation, and they trading in the Syrian people, not just for the this base, military base in Tartus or something. They will, if they come to the point and agree with the United States about the world issues, for example, Central Asia as example, or in
Central Asia, you said?
Central
the
Asia,
ASEAN group.
the ASEAN group, and with India, for example, with the China, and the China here is the surprising issue right now. Taiwan, with Taiwan situation, and we know that the United States supporting Taiwan with some missiles. So Syria is just using it's used actually by these big powers.
By these big powers. Mr. Ishaq in Cairo, what do you need as a help? And elaborate. I have only a few minutes. I want to concentrate with you because you represent the Syrian. You know more than the rest of us about the problems. In your point of view, how could the Arab world help you right now, immediately? How can the Arab world and the international, but let's start with the Arab world and the GCC countries. What do you think? Professor Alan Ben Meyer has spoken about different points. 11 months of uprisings, thousands of people being killed. What is the immediate assistance you need as the SNC?
That's a very important question. Our people inside in Hamas and Bab Amr are calling for assistance. They are being bomb-shelled daily for the last 10 days by the regime. 500 people have died as a result during the last 10 days, only in Hamas.
Only.
So the free world, Turkey, our neighbors, nobody can afford what is going on in Damascus. One of Professor Ben Meyer made very valuable suggestion about what needs to be made immediately, like stopping all flights into Damascus airport or any airports in Syria, withdrawing ambassadors from Damascus, expelling ambassadors of this criminal regimes from countries, making sure that international aid organizations such as the Red Crescent find their way into Syria, help make medicine available to people, and there are many ways to do this, and also providing, yes, weaponry to the Free Syrian Army to protect the civilians and to protect itself from the regime's army. This is, I think, an immediate steps that need to be taken to help the Syrian people, and the political pressure needs to continue on Syrian regime, and on Russia, and on other supporters of the Syrian regime, such as Iran and China. I agree that the interest of Russia goes beyond Syria, so Russia needs to feel that it is jeopardizing its interest outside of Syria and the Arab world and elsewhere, and to be able, this will help also in reducing the help of the Russian to the Syrian regime.
Professor Ben Meyer in New York, give me the immediate solutions in the how do you see the? Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, you know, when your guests talk about who's going to provide the money, you know what, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. We're not talking about billions of dollars. The Saudis, or the United States, the EU, Turkey can write one check that covers these expenses. So it is ridiculous to speak about who is going to pay the bill. When people are dying by the hundreds every single day, the money must be found to stop this slaughter. So I don't buy that argument at all. My friend in Cairo, from the Syrian National Council, is absolutely correct. Time has come to act, to take these action immediately without any further delays, because we are running out of time, and Bashar Assad and his cohorts will not leave power as long as they think as long as not enough pressure being exerted on them from the Arab League, from the United States, from the EU, from Turkey, and everybody in the neighborhood. That is what's going to take, and the sooner we act, the better it is going to be for the Syrian people.
He commented on your.
Yeah,
do you want to add anything? I have 30 seconds.
No, just emotion.
What are the solutions?
Yeah.
Give me the solutions.
Yeah, when we think as a political science, you know, professor or observer, we think without emotional. We stand with the Syrian people. Actually, we are against the Syrian regime, and the king say that with using this, you know, big power and big military against the people. But when we think about countries, we have to think about it. Million of people, not just, one or two, leader, they lead these countries.
Professor Ibrahim Nahas, Professor of Political Science at King Saud University, I want to thank you for joining me. Dear viewers, I want to also thank Alan Ben Meyer, Professor Alan Ben Meyer. He is International Negotiator, Senior Fellow at the Center of Global Affairs, New York University. Last but not the least, from Cairo, Bassam Ishaq, Member of General Secretariat of the National Syrian Council. The viewers, on behalf of Director Hiyam Al-Kilani and the preparation, I don't want to forget Abdurrahman Al-Angari, also Abd Al-Jabbar Al-Kibiri. The preparation team, Hamid Al-Ghamdi, Mohammed Al-Husainan, Khadija Al-Shehri. This is Hassan Al-Shammari wishing you a good night.